Hey, thanks for checking out my video. I'm Papa with Tampa Bonsai LLC, and today I'm going to go through the process of building a commercial or professional quality bonsai soil sifter or separator, particle size separator. Purpose for this, if you're not aware, in bonsai we create our own soil by using multiple raw ingredients that we blend together to create the soil mix that we want for the trees we use. The blend I'm going to show you is just a general all-purpose blend. It's made up of three main ingredients. First ingredient is ground pine bark, and this is the one that needs sifting the worst. It has the most dust in it. It also has the most large particles. The other material that we make it out of is fired clay, which this is very dusty, so we want to get the dust out of it, and it does have some small particulate that we want to remove. And lastly, we use volcanic rock, which is pretty much the right size. We just want to get some of the dust out of it so as to not have soil that compacts too easily and breathes real well. We use three different size materials. This is appliance wire or wire cloth, whatever you want to call it. 1/4 inch is for the upper deck, which this is what separates the large particles out. 1/8 inch is the middle deck. Now this is where most of your usable particle is going to come through on. And the bottom deck that I've never actually made before on the prior sifters is window screen. And I'm going to use this for the volcanic rock and the fired clay to try to remove the dust particles out of it. Unfortunately, it is not a welded cloth like the other two are, so I'm not so sure how well it's going to hold up. That whole portion of the rig could be removed if need be, or simply just remove the cloth. To help ease in the expense of this, I'm going to actually make this whole unit out of old bed frames. We're going to take a grinder, and we're going to grind away some of these rivets that hold different wheels and such together to try to get a couple long pieces. The upper deck we want as long as possible, and you'll see as we're building it why and all that. So keep in tune, we'll update you as that goes. But it's a pretty basic unit. I'm going to build it with the scrap bed frames. We'll do the wire mesh. I'm not going to really get into any fabrication techniques here. I'll tell you that I make my cuts with a electric bandsaw or possibly an angle grinder with a cutoff wheel. I have a little Hobart Handler 140 welder that just works off house current. Does a great job for welding light duty things like this. And I have stock in Rust-Oleum, so I can paint all this old metal constantly, and just love doing it. So we're going to go ahead and get into the process now. I'm going to start making some of the pieces, start grinding the bed frame apart, and come back to you guys in a little bit with the status as we stand. Now understand this though, as we get into this film, this is more geared toward the professional or commercial bonsai artists. Now I guess anybody that needs some sort of soil sifted can use a machine such as this. Just adjust the wire mesh to suit your needs. But what I'm doing is strictly for bonsai soil. But it is not something that's really designed for a person that's going to pot 5 or 6 trees a year. This is for someone who wants to run 55-gallon bags or 55-pound bags through the machine constantly and really make large volumes of material. The way we sift it is through a vibratory method. It's pretty ingenious, works out very well. I'll show you the whole process as we get further down the line here. I watched a lot of videos online on how to build something like this, and quite frankly, a lot of the stuff's pretty scary. So hopefully at the end of this, you'll be impressed and happy and not scared, and end up making yourself a really nice soil separator. If not, well, you can gripe through the YouTube channel, but I don't think anybody's going to. I think you'll be real happy with what we end up making, and look forward to seeing you through the various steps. So I'm going to take a break now and come back in a little bit with the grinding of the bed frames and give you updates as we go through.
Okay, we're back again after getting the metal prepped up here. As I told you before, I've taken some secondhand used free bed frames, metal bed frames, and removed the extra pieces off of them, such as the legs and cross braces and such like that. Cleaned them up and then sliced them up to fit my needs. This is the upper deck. As you can see, it's already been squared up, getting ready to be tacked. The inside length of that is 71 inches, which is about the maximum that you can get out of a regular bed frame if you grind off all the rivets and take the legs and such off without cutting it before the legs. This is the second deck or middle deck. This is 56 inches in total length inside, plus the addition of the ends. Those have not been accommodated for in the total length because the particles will spill out before it gets to the end. So also we have some other miscellaneous pieces here, which are your uprights that will tie the decks together. There's also some little brackets to weld the uprights to that will weld to the outer lip of the decks. And then there's a couple of cross braces that'll go on the top deck that the vibrator unit will mount to. As you can see, just got a little Hobart Hammer 140. Does a great job for light duty stuff like this. And I'm going to go ahead and get to welding and get back with you guys in a little bit and show you where we're going to go to from here. Hope you've enjoyed it so far, and we'll see you in a few. Okay, we've got the upper and middle deck welded together. Starting to rough out the supports that'll reinforce both sides and tie the decks together. Now, if you'll notice that I do run a very sharp angle backwards, and that's because that I'm going to tie the chains down to the bottom here, and I do not want them to touch the frame. Will actually be spreading out because the device it secures to is wider than the unit is. But I do not want to have the chains dampening the vibrations. Also, if I tie it up here to the top, that'll start dampening the vibrations up there, whereas my vibrating unit will be up at the top of the deck. So I don't want to do any dampening until it gets to the bottom. I actually don't want to do any dampening, but there's no choice. It has to be secured. I don't have a magnetic levitation system here. So this is where we're at right now. I've marked where I want the side supports to mount to. I don't have a specific angle on it. I just kind of eyeball it, kind of swagging the whole process, but it worked before, it should work again. Then I'll be putting a lower deck into it, which will actually extend past this end, which we'll discuss that as we get a little further into it. Now, right now, what I'm going to do though is I'm going to take it back down and lay it out and get the appliance cloth or fabric screen sized up to it and rough cut in. It's a lot easier to do that when you're putting this together than once it's all assembled and in use. It's very difficult to work around all the uprights and whatnot. Not to say it can't be done. I've done it before, but I think it's going to be a lot easier if I wrap it now before I start putting the side supports on. Okay, let's get back to another little update as to where we are. As I told you before, I was going to go ahead and break it back down and get the screen roughed in, which is what I've done on the two panels. The larger panel is your upper panel, the smaller panel is the middle panel. I did mention that the upper panel was 71 inches. Actually, this one is not. It's 70 inches on the inside length, excluding the width of the end, or the length of the ends. As you can see, I've screened the entire panels in, leaving an overlap of about 3 inches, which is enough to go over the edge and in turn also go up the vertical. To date, I've actually only used the horizontal to clamp it down with, but I do intend to incorporate some sort of maybe aluminum L bracket or something to force it into the corner, maybe help tighten it up a little bit. That being said, it's always actually worked pretty well, so I'm not that concerned, but I always do leave that extra anyway. And if you'll notice here down at the ends, it's kind of difficult to see, but the screen does not extend all the way to the end. There's about an inch and a half on the upper deck, and I left a little bit more on the middle deck, probably about 2 inches. Reason being is the majority of the material that you'll be working with will actually be coming through on the lower deck, so we'll give it some extra space to fall through. Now, one thing I do want to mention, when you are screening this up, you'll notice the screen is rolled a certain direction. It has a natural bend in it. Unless you really have whatever it takes to straighten that out, you want to make sure that when you do put the screen onto your frame, that the bend is pointed down. And that's very difficult, I'm sure, to see in this, but the actual roll does, the lid rolls this way on both of these screens, which will again help discharge the material off the end. You also want to be careful not to crease or bend the screen if you can, because that may create a channel that will force or cause too much of the particles to work to that area and reduce the efficiency of the sifter. That being said, you can always increase the angle of the sifter to get it to work a little differently. There's a lot of little adjustments that you can do. Now keep in mind that at this point we're only roughing the screen in, so I've cut out notches for the side frames, but I haven't actually bent the screen in real tight to the frame. Now also you want to make sure that you do this by hand. I mean, it's tempting to grab out a hammer and start tapping away to make a real sharp, tight bend. Chances are you're going to end up breaking the screen or tearing it as you create that real tight bend on the edge. Right now, it's just been fingered down the whole length of it to create a nice crease, but I haven't even worried about the back bend for the vertical portion of it. Now, one thing that I did do by mistake is when I framed up this one and put the screen in, I had somehow inadvertently turned the frame around, and so now the front's the back and the back's the front. At this nursery we call that wabi-sabi, which means basically that this is still going to be perfect even though it's imperfect, and its imperfections is what makes it perfect. So I haven't cut the notches for the middle deck yet on the screen, because I'm going to have to get it roughed back up again and get an idea of how I want it to lay out so that everything flows properly and works as it should. But not a big situation. I mean, it's a basic machine. It's going to work pretty well no matter what you do, as long as you get it vibrating properly. So not too concerned with it. So I'm going to do a little bit more work on it. I'll get back with you guys shortly and give you an update. Okay, we've got quite a bit done since the last time we spoke. As you can see, I've got the sifter assembly actually assembled. Everything's welded together or cobbled together is about the best I'm able to do. As you can see, the upper deck, well actually both the decks, we've removed the screen out of it so that I can do the final welding and assembly. And as you can see, the upper deck is just slightly below level plane. The middle deck has about an additional 10 degrees slant to it, and the bottom deck also is parallel to the middle deck. Down here at the end, you'll see that the bottom deck I let extend past the length of the two upper decks. Since we'll be feeding rock and such through this one, I left it that way so that I can actually feed it into that level a little bit easier right from the third deck. Whereas the soil mix and such that we use will drop through the first deck, which will separate the large particles out of it, and then the particle size that we want will come through on the center deck, dropping off over here at the ends of all three of the decks. And as you can see here on the floor, this is one of the screens laid out that's just been rough bent and fit into place. The notches have been notched out in the screen for the side uprights, which you want to trim those back just a little bit more before you put it back on for a final assembly, because those are trimmed with it on the frame already, so they'll be quite tight to the uprights if you just put it on as is. As you can see, just have a upright in the front at a sharp angle. We've got two cross members on top, that's for the vibrator motor, and then an upright in the back. And this is the specifications on it. The inside, I know it's not diameter because it's the rectangle, but the inside distance of the upper deck is 70 inch by 22 inch wide. And then that's not taking into account the ends, which put about another 1.5 inches or so on it. The angle right here, 120 degrees, and the distance from the end to the inside is 1 foot 14 inch on the upper deck. Lower deck, 56 inch by 22 inch inside distances, 110 degrees on that angle, 9 inch from the upright to the end. Bottom, 55.25 by 22 inch inside distance, 110 degree angle, same location, and a 14 inch distance. Now the actual lengths here of the decks are somewhat arbitrary. 70 inches is the longest I can get out of the bed frames, and 56 inches is what I cut this next set out, and 55.25 just happened to be a set that was already the right size, so to speak. I mean, again, it's kind of arbitrary. If there's any scientists out there that can give me some real data behind what I should do or change, let me know. I'm certainly open for suggestions. As it is, I know that the upper deck and the middle deck will work fine. I've never had a lower deck on it before. Hopefully there will be enough vibration transfer to get the rock to go through and get all the dust and such out of the rock. You may see numerous holes around the frame and metal. Only holes that I have actually put in here would be the hole in the middle of the cross member for the vibratory motor. There's one on each side. And then at the bottom corner of each upright, there's a hole for a 1/4 inch bolt. That's where the chains will suspend it from the frame. So the next thing I'm going to do is get this all painted up, cleaned up and painted up. The weather's been a little cruddy, so I can't get out there and do any painting, but a little bit of Rust-Oleum will make this thing look like an actual piece of equipment. And then we'll mock it up, show you the motor that we'll use, and get sifting away. So hope to see you soon, and we'll keep you updated on how things are going. Okay, we're back for another quick update. As you can see, the unit is actually fairly fully assembled. It's sitting upside down right now to make it easier to put the screen in. That's why I said to have the screen pre-cut prior to building the unit. Just makes it a lot easier to drop that in as you're assembling the unit. But as you can see, the unit has been final welded. It's been Rust-Oleumed. I've got the chains hanging on all four corners, and they got the lower screen put into place, which I just secured with some cheap clamps. Not sure how well they're going to work, but they were cheap, so let's put it together and we'll see what happens. As you can see, there's a gap on the bottom tray. And again, this is the bottom tray because the unit is upside down. The gap on the middle tray, which is where most of what you're going to keep is going to come out of. And then the gap on the upper tray, which is the larger material. So the next step is to get this thing flipped over. I've got a temporary structure to hang this on, which will make it a little bit more visible as to what's actually going on. And after I show you how it all works and show you the vibration motor, we'll get it put into its final resting place, which is a permanent structure that I like to use for these. So we'll see you again in just a few moments and hopefully get you updated with a little bit more happenings. Okay, we're back once again and coming to the last couple little segments to finish our project out. And right now I've got the unit hung up on a temporary frame to support it, along with the vibratory motor, which is the Revell Visible V8 engine. Told you it's kind of ingenious. It can be found at most hobby stores. If you don't want to use that, then you may want to use what I actually use. 8-inch bench grinder. Actually, any bench grinder will work. Will depend on the size of the particles you're trying to move and how big your structure is. But on a 3-tier structure, I went with an 8-inch bench grinder. Now we will in this episode, unfortunately, I'm going to have to be popping on and off the tripod a little bit so I can show you a couple things. I apologize for that in advance. But one of the things that I did do on the bench grinder, which I do not condone for anybody to do because it's not safe and is completely against the rules of bench grinding, but I put a little dab of epoxy on the wheels to throw it off balance a little bit. This new bench grinder is actually extremely well balanced, which was kind of disappointing, but this little bit of epoxy seems to have done the trick. As you can see, I've got it bolted down to the cross members. I try to use lock nuts on everything if I can. And as I mentioned earlier about the lengths of the levels being arbitrary, they are, but I did take into account to fit the cement mixing buckets that you get from Home Depot. So you want to leave enough distance so that it'll drop and separate accordingly and not intermix the different particles. So that's the basic structure as it is right now. I've got it, like I said, hanging on a temporary frame, just a couple of garment racks. But as you can get the idea of how it sets, now after I show you how it all works and verify that it all works well, we'll go ahead and put it on its permanent location, which is a table type of frame, which is a nice little setup. So let's go back into the tripod and I'm going to turn this thing on and we're going to see how this thing works. I think you guys are aimed reasonably well. After we get this moving, I'll move things around as needed. But let's go ahead and get this thing fired up. Do keep the safety guards on here. And as what you can see, what we're taking is the raw pine bark mulch material, lots of dust in here, and we're just going to pour it right in the top frame. And I hope that you can see it running down the different frames, or the different levels, and separating itself out. Now the bottom level is catching some material which is really pretty much useless.
at least for this portion, for the bigger material, the rocks and stuff that we'll be supporting, sifting, that's where we'll do it at. But up here, we mainly just use it for the pine bark material, and you can dump it in at a fairly steady rate. I mean, it's not like you can dump a whole 40-pound bag into it, but it does it reasonably expeditiously, and you can go through a 40-pound bag pretty quickly. Go ahead and pop off the tripod again here and give you a little closer look at what's going on. And as you can see, the large particulate is being sifted out on the top level and it's being brought all the way down to the very last container and drop it off. The medium size, or the 1/8" particulate, is being picked up in the center deck, and is being brought in, dropped into the first mixing trough here, and that's the stuff that we want the most, it's more the proper size. Now, unfortunately, one thing we can't do, can't seem to stop the sticks from going through. So you got to kind of watch for some of those. It's not a big deal because they are not dust. The main thing we're trying to put out is, you can see all this super fine dust material, and there's quite a bit here on the third level, which we can just bounce that on down. It'll eventually work its way down, but not a big deal. We're going to just put it all down. So I'm going to go ahead and dump another bucket here and let you guys see what it does. You know, normally you wouldn't completely clear the bucket before you put another one on. And you can adjust the angle with the chain to get it to where it's going correct for the type of material that you're using. Wet material is not good though. You definitely want to work with dry material. The dust will stick to the wet material. It's going to go right on through, which is one of the main things that you want to get out of there. And as you can see, it's going pretty well, and the more this grinder runs, the older it gets, the more it vibrates, and in turn, the better it will separate out. So right now, as you can see, it's doing a pretty decent job fairly quickly, and as you can see, we're filling up our buckets. Now, on the large particulate material, this just has to get reground and rebroken up, and it can go back through the system. The small stuff, you can use that as an amendment to your soil. So it's all usable. Now, not the bonsai soil, but your regular nursery soil, planting soil. Now, again, if you've got, I mentioned earlier, if you've got grooves or bends in the cloth, it's prone to following those channels, and if it's out of balance or not even, you can see it's running all down to one side here. That may also be from a similar situation, but it is clear and fine, except for the bottom level. It's taken a long time, but I was concerned about this with the dust being a little bigger than what we wanted to sift out for the pine bark. So we'll go ahead and run that on through. Now I will tell you though, when you see as we power this down, it starts vibrating considerably more at the lower RPM. Right there, it goes through quite a different change in vibration. So maybe looking into a variable speed bench grinder may not be a bad idea. And see there, it really starts going. I don't know what RPM that's at. I know variable speeds start around 2,000 RPM. So let's go ahead, I'll put you back in the tripod over here, and we're going to run some of the coarser, or the rock material through on the third deck, see how that works. I'm quite interested in seeing that. So we'll go ahead and do this real fast. I'm going to clear one of these buckets real quick. Just going to dump this back in here because I can Obviously re-sift it very easily. Now I'm going to move this down here a little closer because that's where the drop off is for the third deck. So we want to take advantage of that, and that is part of why I left this a little longer, so we can directly feed the third deck as opposed to dropping it through. Although there's no reason it can't be dropped through as long as you don't put too much through at one time so that it jams up or bends or damages the cloth. But let's give this a try and see what it does. This is the small material, the fired clay, and its biggest thing is getting the dust out of it and to get the smaller particles that are in it out of it. And it's running a little bit slower, so it looks like we'd have to increase the angle a little bit to get a little bit more efficiency out of this. So I'll go ahead and do that while it's running. Go up 1.5 lengths. Go up 1.5 lengths. And it looks like it's feeding a little bit better. We could probably have a little bit steeper of an angle on it. But as you can see, or if you can, I don't know if you can, I'll take you back out of the tripod. A large majority of what you're trying to get out drops through as soon as you drop it onto the screen. As you can watch here, see it's already dropping through pretty quickly. And as you get further down, you notice you don't see a lot of the small material or dust build up on top of the pine bark dust. So it's dropping out pretty quickly. And it's feeding out at the end at a reasonable rate. Again, the big key is that this is automated and not hand done. So you can sit here and just keep doing this fairly steady and fairly constantly. And I expected this to be a little bit slower than the other pine bark material just due to the weight of this material and being on the lower deck. Again, this is further from the vibration. Again, if there's any engineers out there watching this that have a better idea, please get with me. Let me know. I'd love to set this up. Well, we tried to make this as easy as possible with the most basic material possible, so that it is as reasonably inexpensive as possible. And now we'll go ahead and speed things up a little bit. Bounce it underneath. That's the easiest way to move it faster down the chute, is to bounce it from the bottom gently. Now, one thing I did forget to show you before we mixed all these particles together, this is the size that we want. But the nice thing is, if you notice on the bottom, there's not all that dust. That's got the big particles mixed back in with the little particles, so I have something to work with here. So I'm going to put you back up in the tripod again, and we're going to run the last of the materials through and see how that does. Dump that back over here. I'll redo it again. Now these are flying down, so this is a pretty steep angle for them, but when I show you what's up underneath this, you'll see that what we're trying to separate, the dust, is coming out quite quickly. And as you can see, this is why I left that lower rack extended, to allow me to feed directly into it. Although it's probably not a problem feeding here, although I don't have catch cans on these higher ones. Well, this material won't actually go through the screen, so it's probably making quite a mess of what's at the end all over the floor. Now, since this is heavy volcanic rock, anytime you touch or handle it, it's going to be creating more dust because it's grinding itself up. And as you can see, it's going down reasonably well. You may be able to see the dust in the air that's floating around. You should definitely be able to see the red tinge that's on the top of the fired plate material that we removed in the last run. And again, you just want to feed it at the speed that the material tells you to feed it at, so that it doesn't sit in a big pump too much and doesn't dampen all the vibration. If you just dump it all in there at one time, it almost stops vibrating completely. And if you need to speed it up a little bit, just bounce the bottom a little bit, get it going, and make it all run itself out through. And we'll kick it off. And as you can see, it's a fairly efficient little setup. It doesn't shake itself apart. It's actually quite smooth, and again, here's that low RPM vibration. I'd love to be able to maintain that for the whole thing, but I don't want to put too much epoxy on the wheels as to create a stress point, possibly having to explode. So we'll deal with it as it is, for what it is. If you have the money, you can invest in a actual vibrating motor or a vibromotor. They do make them, but they look like they start in the few $100 ranges for small ones, but I suspect it only take a small one to really do the job. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this here right now and bring it back once the actual official fixture is set up on it, so you can see what that looks like and how that all ties together is making one really useful structure for a bonsai nursery. So we'll see you guys soon. Thank you. Well, we're back again for the final installment on the bonsai soil particle size sifter. As I mentioned in the last segment, that I was going to build a table around this, or a fixture to mount this on. It was a multi-purpose table, but I quickly found out that by adding the third level to the bottom of the sifter assembly, it would require the table to be too high to actually be functional. To be able to sift the rocks and volcanic rock and fired clay through the bottom rack requires a fairly steep angle for it to roll through smoothly with no backups. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to stick with the two garment racks that I already had used as my test for this. Quite frankly, they work perfectly. Their mounting points are wider than the width of the shaker, which does not allow the chain to touch the side of the shaker except at the base mounting point, as it should be. It's also very easily adjustable. As you can see, they've got heavy welded little tabs on top. I can just pull the chain up and down to adjust the
length of the cable, which changes the angle of the deck. Now, for those of you that decide that you want to make only a 2-level sifting station and you do want to build the table for it, I'll go ahead and give you the specs to show you how we do it. It's again kind of a do-as-you-go type situation. Big difference is you will be building a frame out of the bed frames just like you did for these decks. The only difference is you'll reverse the steel so that the channel is on the inside. That way you'll be able to run wood slats across it to make a tabletop. Again, you want to make it wider than the width of your sifter so that your chains go in at an angle so as to not touch the sides of the sifter. So I'm going to go ahead and pause, and I'm going to show you a quick little diagram as to what I'm talking about that may help you visualize it, and then we should be all set. Hold on just a moment. Well, I don't know how visible this is. It's a glass dry erase board, and there is some reflections in it, but we'll do the best we can to get the point across to you. As you can see here, this structure is the table itself with a couple little gussets. This unit here is the actual sifting assembly with the vibratory motor in the center. The little red dots are the chains that secure it to the table. Now, by doing it this way, if you do an inside channel like I spoke, if you look at the top diagram, you'll be able to lay slats of wood across the channel. You'll actually have 2 pieces of wood that'll fill in this area here, but that can be quickly removed to open up the access to the end of the sifter. And what that allows you to do is to throw a bag, that's what this black picture is a bag of whatever the ingredient is you're sifting, and just scrape it into the upper tray. It'll run through the upper tray, separate into the lower tray, and it'll do its thing and then spill off at the end into the catch cans. It's a real nice little setup. When it's not being used, you put the 2 slats back into place, which makes an actual tabletop out of it. You put a plastic bag over your vibratory motor, and you're good to use that as a table until the next time you decide you need to brew up some soil. Unfortunately, like I said, the method that I used put an extra layer on it, which does kind of prevent this from being used. But it is a really nice setup if you care to do it. Please feel free to go that route. Or if you're 8.5 foot tall, you can do the 3-level sifting tray and still build a table out of it. But since I'm short and stubby, no table in my future for a 3-level sifting tray. So I hope this has cleared up a few things. This sifting unit does work extremely nicely. It doesn't vibrate a lot. There's not a lot of violent action that's happening to it like a lot of the ones that I saw online. So I hope it does you very well. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to get in touch with me through the website, tampabonsai.com, or through the YouTube channel. Thanks a lot. I hope you enjoyed it and look forward to seeing you on some of our future videos.